I realized in that moment, Erica, that of all the steps that I came up with, that framework to overcome the impact of adversity, the one I left out is you have to be able to own and claim and say. Now, not everybody needs to own and claim and say their story to the public, unless you do, in which case, great. It's just to a trusted friend, a therapist, a someone. Not trauma sharing, but being able to say, this happened, this is a part of who I was, it's helped to shape me, but I am not that. Some way being able to claim and own and give it a name.
Cheryl Hunter, welcome to the show. So honored to have you on. Thank you for being here.
Erica, it is a delight. Thank you. And a long time coming. I've been a fan, so it's just it's a treat.
Thank you so much. Well, I am so excited to dive, first of all, into your story, most importantly, because I know as horrific as your story is that people are going to learn today, what has come out of that story and how you rose above all the darkness is so awe-inspiring. And I think even though some people might have not gone through something as traumatic as you have, I believe all of us have gone through really challenging things and we still feel stuck. And I want people to feel free again. Yep. And so we're going to kind of unravel that in your story. And also, how did you get to the point where now you're sharing your story and you're helping others share their story too, so that they could feel like what has happened to me no longer will keep me captive. And now I'm free and I'm now available to help serve everybody in a big, big way by sharing my story. And I know that's how you teach people today. So let's just go into the trenches right now. So you're a kidnap survivor. You were held against your will, left to die. Can you bring us back to this traumatic event and what took place?
I grew up on a horse ranch in the really, really remote Rockies of Colorado, where it was so remote that it could have been hundreds of years ago, it would have been virtually undistinguishable from how it was when I was a kid. And as a little girl, it was heaven. I spent the majority of my time, including doing my schoolwork, on the back of my horse. And it was fantastic until I got to be a teenager. And then I was like, I've got to get out of here. I feel stuck and I'm rotting away my life, at the ripe old age of 13, 14, 15,
of course,
rotting my life away in this ranch with no people. And the only signs of real civilization I could see was when I would lie in the horse meadows looking up at the sky and seeing planes fly overhead. And I thought, God, I want to be going someplace. How do I get to be the girl in the plane looking down at the girl in the meadow? I want to be her. And I thought, well, first I got to figure out how would I help people? What's my purpose in life? I don't have any idea. I ride horses fairly well, but I'm certainly not the best. It can't be that. But I just thought, let me get out into the world and I'll figure it out. I decided to take a trip with my best friend to Europe, and I was going to figure it out then. I didn't care really what big city that I ended up in. I just wanted to be in a city, someplace where they wore something other than bootcut Wranglers covered with mud. And I'm just going to go where fashion exists. I'm going to go to the big city. And it was so exciting. I'd worked several jobs, saved up my money. My friend had done the same. Here we go. We're off on this adventure. We get to France. This man comes up to me and says, "Hey, are you a model? I can make you one." Literally, we just arrived. "Just come with me and my friend over there," he says. And look, in retrospect, it's got all the hallmarks of this is a bad idea. But I thought, I'm smart. I'm strong. I can drive a tractor trailer and wrestle a steer. I mean, I know I'll figure it out. And modeling, I could do that. I'm tall enough. I could, that they don't do that in Rye, Colorado. I'm going. And I ditched my friend and went. They said, hey, you want some wine? And I'm like, no, I want to be good for the photos. I mean, when I met the man, he had a big camera around his neck and he said modeling. I figured the first thing we were going to do is shoot photos. And they're like, well, don't be, a stupid American. Everybody drinks wine. We have some Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really fancy. I'd heard the name, I think, but I was like, dang, this is so fancy. They drugged me. When I came to, we were driving in a car and I had my head kind of hanging out the window like a dog with my tongue out and I was drooling and I was thinking, okay, wait, this is not good. This is not good. They took me to what probably was a construction site that was abandoned. You can fill in the gory details with your mind, but they were just sadistic. They continually beat me. They tried to drown me. Everything you could think of with men and me. I just had no concept of how to deal, what to even think. Before I had gone, at the ranch, there was this freak accident and a baby drowned. And nobody was, quote, to blame. There were a lot of people, a lot of moving pieces. Nobody was in charge of the child that had been left there. It was a freak accident. But I, after it happened, had said to myself, I deserve to be punished. And I had forgotten that. It's just like one of those negative things that we can say to ourselves rather. And I'm lying there on the cement covered in blood and urine and whatever else. And I said, oh, wait, I deserve to be punished. This should be happening. Now, it was the mind of a child. As a teenager, you're still a child.
Yeah.
And I remember lying there talking to God, my impression of God at the time, some gray-haired man in the clouds kind of thing. I promise I'll be a better person. I won't be such a horrible, bad person. If you just let me go, I'll be happy all the time. I'll be nice to my little brother and sister. I'll be good. Just let me live. And then suddenly, all along, it's such a funny thing. I kept asking the men in between these horrible acts, are we going to take the photos? Are we going to take the photos now? Are we going to take the photos? And then for whatever reason, days later, they chopped off my hair, took me to this stretch of ground, and we're driving, and I look over and I go, oh, this is a Mercedes. I've now been in a Mercedes. I mean, I'm a ranch raised cowgirl, basically just rode in a pickup. And I'm like, God, I was so sheltered and naive,
Right.
And they drove to this spot of ground and just pushed me out. And I'm lying there in this flump on the ground. And the man says, darling, like I'm his darling. And I look back over my shoulder and he starts snapping photos. But then I've got this conundrum. Wait, I told God I was going to be happy. How's that going to work? I felt suddenly more captive when I was free than before, because now I had all this stuff in my head, these horrible memories and these thoughts of, I have got to get back at them. I've got to make them pay. I've got to, and I'm ruined. Nobody can ever know this. Nobody can ever find out what happened to me, or they will run in horror from the idiot, the filthy, damaged idiot that I am. I had no coping skills. I mean, do we ever kind of thing, particularly at that age. I'm going to just pretend it didn't happen. That was about as good as I could do.
Obviously, you were freed because you're here today. But I could only imagine, and thank you for sharing your story as you always do, because I think, again, as I mentioned, maybe people haven't gone through such a horrific thing. I could only imagine, or we could only imagine. But from there, as you said, you remained captive in your mind. And I think a lot of people, no matter what you've been through, I think a lot of people, where we really get stuck is in our head, in our thoughts, in this story loop. As you mentioned, I felt I was broken. I felt, disgusting and all the things. And I think a lot of people, especially when that happened to you so young, feel that way. How do we break free of that? What did you do after this? I'm sure this was years of things that happened, but what were some of the things that you started to address first on when you started noticing I'm more captive than I was before?
So one thing I want to address first is you'd said, everybody may not have experienced something so traumatic. I'm paraphrasing, but one thing I really learned through the course of this journey is trauma is a spectrum, and it's completely subjective.
Right.
We could have been taunted as a kid for something and be as traumatized as somebody who's experienced something that everyone would say, oh God, that's the worst thing. It's what we do with it. It's how we contort and compensate and build around that scar tissue. And so I don't want to discount anybody's experience, because it could be just like, well, God, I've never been the same since my parents got divorced.
Right.
And that is valid. But one of the things I realized for myself, I thought I was wallowing, and I don't mean to say that to speak, in any sort of demeaning, pejorative way about myself and my process, but I was in a state where I just kept imagining how I could pay them back and how I could get, avenge myself and somehow do that. And I realized this is not going well, because a life lived in that kind of an inquiry. How do I get back at them? How do I get my own back? How do I make this unhappen? Like we could unwind a clock. It's fantasy thinking. And I'd read this book. I distanced myself. I started journaling and writing, and I started reading, and I just used books or something to keep myself far from people. That was one thing I did. But I read a book called Letters to a Young Poet, Rilke. And he said something about, and it was totally different, but I applied it. But he said something about this young poet kept writing him and asking, what do I do about this? And what do I do about this? And how to become a better poet? And what do I do here? And what do I do there? And he said, I'm really paraphrasing, just forget the answers. Live only the questions right now. And it was like, wait. Live a question. What in the hell oh, wait, I am living a question. The question I'm living is, how do I get back at these sons of guns? How do I punish these bastards forevermore? Why me? All the questions I was living were leading me to a life where, frankly, I wanted to die. It was so intolerable. And I thought, I'm just going to ask a better question. Why not me? That seemed too hard. But what better question could I live right now? How could this help? Oh, God, that seems too hard. What is good right now? I just would try to find some question to live that was just a step up from the hell and a step better. And the other thing I did, Erica, was I said to my mom, God, I feel so depressed. And I had never told her what had happened. So she goes, do you mean bored? I was like, I was a teenager. No, I mean, actual bona fide depressed. She goes, well, there is a common adage that if you're hurting, there's always someone hurting worse. Find those people, help those people. And I thought, God, who's hurting worse than me? I'm old, screwed in the head, and have no future. I mean, I'm young, screwed in the head, and have no future. I just gave away the joke as I was thinking in my mind. Oh, I'll find old people who are screwed in the head and have no future. They've got it worse because nobody listens to old people. And okay. And I started volunteering at old age homes of all different kinds. Did that for many years. But at first, it was just like I found my people. They just wanted to talk. No one wants to listen to old people. And so they would just talk endlessly. And when they did, I couldn't think about all the nonsense I'd been thinking about previously in my head. It was like, retrieval for us both. What a gift. And then I thought, you know what? Here's the thing. I'm not the first person to go through adversity. These people have gone through a whole heap of things. There were a ton of Holocaust survivors, war vets, people who'd gone through the unthinkable. What did they do to overcome? I don't want to read it in a book. I want to hear it. I want to grapple with it and wrestle with it. I want to ask questions. And eventually I started codifying and making steps. Do this, don't do that, do this. And I tried all the things and it worked. And I thought, oh my God, you know what? Everybody goes through trauma. Who could I help? And so I started finding survivors of trafficking, survivors of rape, sexual assault, violent crime, and trying it out with them. Hey, look, I'm no psychotherapist, but I'm somebody who's been there. Maybe this would be helpful. Maybe it won't. If you want to try it, I'll work through it with you. And it worked. I was realizing I had something I wanted to give people. The irony is, I thought, God, as I was that girl lying on the meadow, looking up at the sky, thinking, well, what is my purpose? What do I give people? I don't have any way to help. The thing that I least wanted to happen in the world became the way. Isn't it amazing how life works out?
So, talking about, you mentioned that you never shared what happened to your mom. And kind of the ironic thing is you're helping all these people. But I know part of your story is you actually, at this point, when you were helping people overcome these adversities and these things that have happened to them, you hadn't yet shared your story. So I would love to hear that moment when you first told people what happened, because I think a lot of people are still living in silence. They're still suppressing what has happened to them. And so through you as an example, I would love to hear when you first shared it, how you felt after you shared it, and what then transpired. loaded question.
One of the things that I had also done to overcome was I started taking personal development seminars and programs. And once I had taken everything that I could find, I asked them, well, what else do you got? And they said, well, you can be trained to lead them. And I was like, I don't know that that's what I want to do with my life. I was writing by this time and had my original writing developed by and then ultimately purchased by a lot of different studios and networks. And I thought, I want to keep doing that as my life or livelihood and, as my life's work. But tell me more about leading these programs. And they said, well, you get to be the author of the work because you're giving it away to other people. And I thought, now that sounds interesting, because I felt good when I was taking these programs and not always so solid on my feet when I wasn't. So I trained myself to led programs for the world leader in personal development and many, many years. And I had a group of people who just came to my seminars once a week and had been doing so for many years. And we were doing an exercise one night. The topic was forgiveness. There's like almost 300 people in the room. We're doing this exercise and I'm reading from the manual, and forgiveness is possible and anything can be forgiven. And I'm just not sharing. I'd never shared at this point. I sort of hinted to a psychotherapist and some of the people that I'd helped with my trauma work that something possibly non-consensual in the realm of sex had happened, but that was about it. In this seminar, a woman starts raising her hand, but like angry and crying, and there's waving her hand, and there's no denying her. I brought her up to the microphone, and she's talking about the genocide and the horrific things that she faced in her country, got her kids out, came here, and now the horrible things that she and her children experienced at the hand of her spouse. And she's saying certain things just cannot be forgiven. And I'm like, no, everything can be forgiven. I wasn't a lousy leader, but it was distant. And this man stands up, throws down his notebooks and goes, this is bullshit. And he storms out of the room, and people are getting really upset and on her side. Mm-hmm. And I had this moment where I had a conversation with myself, but it happens in a flicker, but it seems like it's a long conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you are no longer a child. Whatever you're trying to protect no longer exists. It's a part of a world that isn't even here any longer. Why are you keeping silent? And I just said, that's it. And I shared. And the room was silent. Everybody sat down that had gotten up and was stirring around at the back of the room and doing whatever they were doing. This woman fell silent. But most importantly, she burst into sobs and said, I see it, I can. And then I'll be free. And I'd said, it's not about condoning what occurred. It's about saying, I am no longer going to be tethered to what occurred. I'm no longer going to be comprised of and constituted by what occurred. I am beyond all of it. And I set it free so that I can be who I was meant to be. And it was so liberating at a level I couldn't have imagined. And I realized in that moment, Erica, that of all the steps that I came up with, that framework to overcome the impact of adversity, the one I left out is you have to be able to own and claim and say. Now, not everybody needs to own and claim and say their story to the public, unless you do, in which case, great. It's just to a trusted friend, a therapist, someone. not trauma sharing, not, oh, well, this happened to me. Well, you think that's bad? Nothing like that, but being able to say, this happened. This is a part of who I was. It's helped to shape me, but I am not that. Some way being able to claim and own and give it a name. I do a lot of public speaking. And when I do, invariably people line up and come up to me afterward and say, I've never told anybody, but, and I was interviewed on the news once, and the newscaster said something like, it was regarding whoever we were discussing. It was commentary on somebody else's story. Are we really supposed to believe? Look at my tone here. No judgment. Are we really supposed to believe that she was sexually violated all these years ago and she just never told anybody? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a common phenomenon. When a person goes through adversity, they keep it to themselves. First, they blame themselves. They keep it to themselves. And it is very common. They haven't felt safe to reveal and have compensated and contorted around it. And it's truly liberating to be able to claim it and then ultimately release it.
Absolutely. I think so many of us, as you just mentioned, as clear as day, is so many of us suppress it, wear masks, do whatever we can to hide that part of us, of what has happened to us, because we feel ashamed, hurt, or whatever feelings around it. And I think, as many people have heard, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And I think that's where it comes. We need to shine the light on the darkness, for that the light could then be revealed. And, it's funny. I actually pulled this out because of you. I've heard this in your story, and I would love to share this. There's a concept called wabi-sabi. And I'm going to pull this for anybody watching on YouTube. I'm going to share this, and then she's going to share what wabi-sabi means and how this impacted her in really coming to, I guess you could say, acceptance. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a good visual. So I found this. There's another saying, and maybe you'll remember, it's another Japanese saying, I believe, but I'm holding up this little figurine. It's a woman. She has cracks in her, and there's gold painted in the cracks. And I love this concept. And probably, I forgot the name of it. Have you heard of that? I think it's a Japanese thing, and it's probably going to come.
I think
Kasubi or
kintsugi, I think is
yes,
the one.
It's a bowl that's been broken, and what they do is they put it back together by gluing it in gold, and you could see the gold, and it looks more beautiful because of this precious little masterpiece that was created out of broken pieces. And so this kind of resembles it, what I'm showing on YouTube. So wabi-sabi has a similar meaning. I would love if you could talk about this and how this impacted you.
When I was free, I thought, okay, I can never go back to the horse ranch. There's no way I'm going back to Colorado. I would rot away there and die. You know what I mean? If there was no other stimulus, but sitting there and thinking, being with my thoughts all the time, I was like, no, I need to stay. Now I must stay in the city. And I thought, well, I've gone through all this stuff to become a model. Screw it. I'm going to become one anyway. And I got some magazine that listed all the model agencies in London, went to every single one. And the second to the last one said, oh, okay, you're American. We kind of like that. Okay. And I was like, I'll take it. And so I ended up doing that as a career for a while and traveling the world. And Japan was one of the places where they sent me. They always have to send you someplace else. It's like a grass is always greener phenomenon. You're in Milan, they go, oh, Paris is the cool place. You're in Paris, they're like, oh, London is the cool place. I don't know why, but here I am in Japan, always reading books to keep myself separate from people. And a lot of the models would hang out in the day, but I'm like, no, I don't want to get in conversations with people. If they get too close, they'll know something's wrong with me. I can't do that. And so I used to just hang out at the agency in the conference room. And the only people ever that came in there were my agent's grandparents. It's such a fascinating phenomenon, paralleling how we in the United States, we don't really listen to our elderly, whereas in Japan, my agent had her grandparents there in case she needed to make any big decisions during the day or come up with solutions to problems. She would pose it to the grandparents and they would chime in. Is that amazing? Could you imagine? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to go too off on a tangent, but I'm sitting in the conference room reading alone, as I usually did, and I'm absentmindedly tracing my hands over. They had this massive wood table there that looked like they'd cut it from a solid tree. It was wide at one end, like the tree must have been narrowed a little bit toward the other end, and all the eyes of the wood, of the branches, all of it had been left in. It was polished, so it wasn't really rough, but I was rubbing my fingers over one of the divots, and the grandmother comes up and says, oh, wabi-sabi. And I'm thinking, like, wasabi? Like, I didn't know. I never heard it. And the grandparents just chuckle, and the grandfather says, no, wabi-sabi is the most essential of all Japanese principles. It states that the beauty of any object lies in its flaws. So, like with this table, the damages, the flaws are designed in to be an integral part of the work of art. That's what makes it beautiful. Something can only be seen to be beautiful to the exact degree that it has damaged parts. And I'm thinking, first of all, I never heard of anything like that. Usually, in my experience, if there would be a table like that, they'd polish it all out, buff it out completely, make it polished and perfect. Isn't that the point, to make everything in the world polished and perfect? But wait, what I'm really thinking is, could this apply to humans? Could this apply to me? And I had to get out of there. It was too much. My mind was spinning. I grabbed my stuff and ran out of there and just walked as far as I could and just paced and thought, if this is real, wait, this can people actually think things like that? And I finally realized, God, I haven't eaten all day. I stopped at like a Japanese version of a McDonald's. I was a teenager, that kind of thing. Got some lunch at the counter, came and sat down at this large outside place with tables. And I'm sitting there eating, just lost in thought. And all of a sudden I hear this shouting, and it's from a woman sitting. There's my table. I'm facing inward, and then an empty table, and then a woman like a couple tables away, just like me, mirroring me, but she's facing me. And she's got a whole bunch of bags with her. She may have been homeless, quite possibly. She's just screaming. And I was like, oh, okay. That's kind of what happens. And I just took my book out to keep myself separate from her. And a man at the table next to me leans in and he says, she asks why you make war on Japan. I'm like, what? Make war on Japan? What are you talking about? World War II? That was like my grandparents' era. I don't even, what? And I'm talking aloud indignantly, and she's talking aloud indignantly. And she takes out this little like paper envelope type thing with two little, what look like photo booth photos, black and white. One's a man, one's a woman. She puts them on top of her head like this and just starts shouting, and she's screaming, and snot is coming out of her mouth and nose and tears. And she's just like nuts. And everybody in the restaurant area, seating area, is now staring directly at us. And I can't stand to be stared at. It just, I don't want to be looked at. Yeah, it was a model, but nobody cares about me. They only care about the meat suit. It was the perfect business for me. Nobody knows anything about me. And they were all looking, and it made me so damn uncomfortable. And the man leans in again and says, she asks, why do you kill her parents? And that was enough. I just go, kill her parents? Who the hell does she think I am? Some person in the army? I'm a teenager. I wasn't even alive. I don't even know. And suddenly I'm crying and spitting and snot and dripping down out of my nose. And I look at her and I'm like, this woman is nuts. Can nobody see this? She's screaming at nobody, and she's out of her mind, and she's me. She's somebody who has faced what seems so freaking unfair and wrong, and she cannot make sense of it. And she wants to figure out what the fuck. And I just stopped and bowed to her. And I said the only thing that I could think of, wabi sabi. And she just stopped. Wow. She put the little photos away. Everybody stopped looking. And I gathered my things and left. And I'm walking there having reaffirmed I am not the only person to have something hard happen. That's the human condition.
Absolutely.
But somehow in saying, why did you make war on Japan? Why did you kill my parents? Somehow I pray that woman was liberated even a bit to say that and be witnessed by me, the man, and everybody there. But I know it's possible when someone holds space for us and we can share our experience authentically to be made whole again.
My goodness. And I think that's so much become your mission, is really allowing or giving people the permission to share their heart, their story authentically, so that they, even as little as, but even though this is not little, this is huge, to get it out there, to get it out of your body, to no longer keep it trapped inside your mind and captive in there, as you speak about. But then also what has become out of your story is very much your mission. I think this is, especially in today's world, especially I'm in the personal development world, this podcast is all about this. I know a lot of people that are on the journey in healing, in personal development, they too have a story and they have it on their heart, whatever it may be. Maybe it's not a business, maybe it's not a passion or anything, but they have it on their heart to share their story, because they know that by sharing their story, they could help somebody else feel that they're seen. And I think that is so huge. And I think that when somebody shares their story authentically, shares their heart, it's not necessarily about you relating to their story, meaning like it doesn't have to be the same thing that happened, but you see yourself in them. And that's when it really impacts you. And so this has led into your mission. But before I want to talk about that, I think it's important, because I want to wrap this with a bow, and everything you're talking about is the healing process. If somebody's listening right now that has not maybe yet shared their story, or they feel broken, they feel just like what has happened to them makes them feel less than, what would be your advice to them? What are some of the things they should do to help them heal? Maybe some tangible things you possibly recommend. I know it's not an overnight process, but anything you could help serve them with today.
There are those things that occur to us that we wouldn't have ever chosen for ourselves. And what I found, just anecdotally, and then in working with many others on this, is that if we say no to it, like, this shouldn't be, I'm a good person, I mean, whatever the no looks like. No, I refuse. I want to go back to life like it was before. Any version of not wanting it, even getting to the point of just tolerating it, is a slight step up. Like, okay, I'll tolerate it. Now, look, tolerate isn't a huge step up. Like, none of us want to be, quote, tolerated. But it's a step up from hell no, right? And if we can work our way up that ladder, like I said, I felt so miserable when I kept saying, no, this shouldn't be. I've got to make things right by, it was just so tiring and exhausting. And I felt miserable all the time. And finally saying, okay, I'll tolerate it. And then there's another step up, which is just kind of to neutral, letting it be. And then accepting it is another step up the ladder. And these are all big steps, and they may take some time. But then there's a step, and I know this sounds counterintuitive and unthinkable when you're at hell no, but embrace and actually loving it is the step at which it can unlock its gifts. And if there's one thing I've learned, I promise you, the worst of circumstances holds some gift, but it can only authentically be unlocked with a yes. A yes, thank you. Gratitude for it. So as counterintuitive and crazy town as it may sound, I am so blessed and grateful for the kidnapping. It's allowed me to become the human I always wanted to be. It's allowed me to have a purpose and something to give. I think the deepest wish we each have is to be able to contribute. It's allowed me to contribute something. So one, find a way to work your way up the ladder at your own pace, at a pace which honors where you are. And it's fine to be at hell no, but know that there are steps upward from there. And then the second is find a way to authentically share your journey with somebody. Again, a trusted therapist, friend, family member, partner, whatever it is. And you may want to pre-frame the conversation. Please just listen. Don't add anything. I just need to be heard. It's not the time you want to be coached.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I think. No, I
Yeah,
don't. No, I don't care.
so true, right? Wow. I mean, just what you shared. I know it's like it's not going to happen overnight, but like you said, just taking the steps, and you are obviously a testament that we too can overcome big horrible things, or whatever it may be, challenges. There is a way, and you just have the will. You just have to have the will to rise above whatever your rock bottom is, whatever moment you're going through, is that there's still light at the end of the tunnel, and you are proof of that. And so now you help people share their story in a very compelling way, and also you help people get on mainstream media if that is of interest to people. But talking to the people that are interested in getting their mission out there, and their mission is to help serve people. Usually when we're on the flip side of something, we're like, oh, I need to share this because I could help people that where I've been, right? That's the beautiful thing that a lot of coaches do and everything. So there is a lot of people that are probably listening that want to do that. How does when somebody is starting to craft their compelling story? I know there's a part like memorizing your story and everything, but what are some key things we need to think about when we're sharing our story? Because it's not always about, oh, woe is me, this happened to me, and then you just vomit it. You have to pull in the people you're talking to. And the only way you could pull people, actually, I mean, you could speak better to this, but this is just what I would think. The way you pull people in is when they connect to your story, meaning like, oh, I could see myself in you. I could see myself in this story. What would you say to that? So my question is basically, what are the key components to creating this compelling story so that it could be really, really landing with those you're telling it with?
I'd like to answer the question, Erica, by sharing a little story, if I may. Thank you. So
Yeah.
I had this framework to overcome adversity, and I thought, God, we all deal with it. I want to help. And I was simultaneously now writing network TV. I'd sold some shows, and I thought, oh my God, I can see major media is so powerful. It shapes our collective narrative. What if I could get that that is possible to overcome adversity out to the world? Well, I'm already working in media. I'm this will be a piece of cake. It took me a decade. And part of it was at first because I never shared my story. It was just like, it's possible to overcome adversity. I'm going to share with you. Are you a psychotherapist? Nope. Are you a psychiatrist? Nope. Are you a licensed family and
Nope,
marital
nope, I
therapist?
just know it all.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just know it all.
But
I just
yeah.
love adversity. It just like, okay, that was terrible. And then I started sharing the story, and I didn't know. Look, I know how to write. I was able to sell dang TV shows, but I didn't know how to write in this kind of thing. And whenever I'd share my story, people would go, "Oh, I'm so sorry for you.
Hmm.
You must need a hug." And I was like, yeah, not the kind of response I'm trying to elicit. Or people would be like, oh, is it that time already? Excuse me, I've got to go. It would make them so
Wow.
uncomfortable and worried for me. And I just didn't know how to share my story in such a way that people felt okay, both about me and themselves, didn't want to run away. And I realized I got to stop. I want, it's not about the trauma. It's about the triumph. So share that part. I mean, look, we're still living, breathing, kicking. There is a triumph. Put your
Yes.
flag in the ground, find it, whatever that is. What is that? That's a good place to start. And now I can help people do the same or something. But leave people with that side rather than concerned for you. But you touched on this before, and I want to underline it. It's so important. When we authentically share our stories in that way, where it's about the triumph rather than, a trauma share type thing, what people are left with is their story, their experience, how we're similar, even if, like you said, there's not a darn thing in common between
Right.
us. Oh, you're Maori, and talking about how you've never fit in either world and what a challenge it is. Oh my God, I love you. I feel just the same. I've never even been to New Zealand. You know what I'm saying? It's like, let alone, I'm sure as heck ain't Maori, but it's like the human theme is not feeling like we fit in.
Yeah.
When we can share authentically our true journey, it evokes those common human themes, and people feel seen and known and heard. And that, when you're talking about like being a coach, everybody's got their own origin story, and told in this way. God, everybody, I need to work with you. You're the only one. I
Right.
have to work with you. It sure beats the hell out of being price shopped and commoditized. And well, how many one-to-ones does that include? Or something like that. It's like, no, you get it. You get me just because you shared your story.
Absolutely. So I know you help people do that today. And so for anybody listening right now, this is another part of this episode I want to include in here for anybody that has something in them and possibly has never shared it, or they want to get their mission out there in the world. How do you serve people today in the business or the mission you have right now in helping people?
One of the things I did in that decade that it took me to finally get major media for the message about overcoming adversity, I hired a lot of publicists. I thought, oh, well, I mean, that's what you do, isn't it? After I realized it wasn't all the things I had done wrong. And it I mean, like, I could see the budget for the TV shows that I was working on, and the line items, $410,000 right there, publicist. That's got to be what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it just, I learned after hiring many and spending all my money that it's really great if you're famous. If they've got something to publicize, it's really great. But I wasn't media trained. I didn't know how to write a soundbite or talking points or news jack. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I didn't know it. And so even though I had contacts, it was not going well. I kept burning bridges at places, well-meaning, well-intended, having something to say, but not knowing how to say it. And so I realized once I finally got my message out, God, there's got to be a way to help other people who want to change the world through their work. And I gathered different journalists and TV director producers that I'd met along the way and said, okay, here's my thought. Let's encircle these mission-driven experts and help them share their message with the world. Why is that a stupid idea? Tell me where I'm wrong. And they were, to a person, I got into media to help people. So now it's one of the things we do is help people find their story, help them get media trained and become their own publicist. Because I think it works better to be your own brand champion than just entrusting that big thing to somebody else. You want to champion your own message in the world. At least I think so. Yeah. Would it be awesome to be a huge be hugely famous and have a publicist just fielding calls? Sure. But I don't know that that's the case for most people, right?
Yeah.
There was a college planner, husband and wife, that came to us, and it was like in the impact of the pandemic, they said, we've been in business 10 years and we're going to have to close our doors. no kids want to go to school if they're not going to meet in person, and no parents basically want to send their kids to school if they are going to meet in person. We don't know what to do. And the husband said, I think we should probably sign an NDA because of my story. And suddenly I'm like, okay, now I'm listening. Tell me your story. Now he's very public about this now. But at the time he said, I never went to college. A college planner who didn't go to college?
Wow.
That's shameful. And I was like, okay, well, tell me your story. I'm listening. And he said, I'm the quintessential son of an immigrant. My mom, after his dad passed away, my mom was raising 5 kids. Just a hardworking Filipino woman, had 5 jobs, 5 kids. College, we couldn't put food on the table. We all had to get jobs when we were little. How could I go to college? And I said, so why'd you become a college planner? I don't want any kid with potential to die with their potential still inside of them. Could you hear? I mean, it's like, this is so brilliant. Okay, Danny, we're actually going to lead with the I never went to college thing.
Right.
Oh, man, what are people going to do? What are they going to say? Danny and Karen ended up hiring 28 of their competitors to come work for them as
Wow.
other college planners. And it's just like, I say that to say story, our authentic story, those things that we hide, that we think need to be polished and perfect. That's not the stuff that makes people say, I need you, nobody else. That's not the stuff that makes people feel heard and seen. It's that wabi-sabi stuff, the stuff that we think is so wrong about us is actually what makes people say, you get it.
Yeah.
And makes people beat a path to your doorway.
I think that's where, thankfully, how things have changed in the world is people are being more authentic in sharing their truth. And that's how we're connecting. Really, the world becomes more connected when we do share stories and we share our authenticity. And it makes it a more beautiful place because then there's more humanness that we connect with. So it's really beautiful. And I'm so appreciative of your work today. And I know how it's shifted, but obviously I think there's so many gems in this, especially speaking to the people that, can see themselves in Cheryl's story and what she's shared today, meaning that she felt so broken, so dark inside that she felt like if she shared what happened to her, she wouldn't be accepted, she wouldn't be liked, or whatever it may be. And I know a lot of people listening feel that way, but I hope you've heard something today that has really landed with you to know that you are not broken and you can be beautifully repaired, if you want to say, by just filling in some of the gold glue, as I alluded to earlier, and as she spoke about the wabi-sabi. I think that's a great visual to think about, that, we could put ourselves back together even more beautifully if we just live authentically and share our heart and not feel ashamed about it. Because as Cheryl mentioned, we all go through adversity, really. So I really hope there was some gems that really landed with you guys today, whoever's listening to this. And just to know that you matter and your story matters too. And so if you want to work with Cheryl and you want to help serve your mission that's on your heart today, Cheryl, can you tell them where to find out more to possibly get their mission out there in the world?
My website is CherylHunter.com, and it's CHERYL.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So Cheryl, I would love to ask you, and of course, everything will be in the show notes. I would love to ask you my closing question I ask all my guests, which is, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you feel you need to shout out to the world, what would that piece of wisdom be and why?
Consider that everything that you're looking for is already there, and it's in the things that you wish had not happened. When you say yes to those things and authentically embrace and even love and bring those things into your heart, they can release that gift. And that gift will not only be a gift for you, but anyone that you choose to share that with.
Thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal conversation. And I just thank you so much for sharing your heart today and going
Erica.
back into your story and sharing it with us. Sorry for my dog barking, by the way. If you hear it.
Hey, the animals know, right? They're attuned to something we have possibly forgotten. So I'm using it as a wonderful cosmic underline. Thank you.
Thank you so much.